Hey, welcome back to the Photoshop Training Channel. My name is Jesus Ramirez, and you can find me on Twitter at JR from PTC. Today I'm going to be sharing with you an Adobe Connect presentation I did a few months ago. It was a live presentation for the Photoshop and Lightroom group on Facebook where I talk about layer masks. I actually will be doing another live presentation soon, and I'll let you know the details on that via email. So if you're not a PTC subscriber, you can sign up now. Simply go to my website, photoshoptrainingchannel.com, and enter your email on the email box. Also, if you're not a member of the Photoshop and Lightroom group on Facebook, you can go to facebook.com/groups/pshop and Lightroom and click on the join button. But anyway, let me know what you think of the video, or let me know if you have any questions. Just leave them down below.
Okay, so let me do a intro. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As we posted in the group and on the event page, Kelly McCatherine has the flu, and we just found out today, like half an hour before this begins, but hope she gets better. And therefore, Jesus Ramirez has stepped in, and very much appreciate that. So he saved the day. Let's give all a big thank you to Jesus for that. And so let me take this time to introduce him. So Jesus Ramirez is an online digital graphics educator specializing in Adobe Photoshop. His content can be seen through his website, which is the Photoshop Training Channel. It was founded in July of 2012, and he's also on many other design and photography related websites. Currently, his YouTube channel has over 1 million views. Is that correct, Jesus?
It's probably a little more than that by now, but yeah, over 1 million.
Excellent. Over 1 million views and about 38,000 subscribers. Is that bigger now too, probably?
Over 40,000 by now.
Excellent. Very nice.
Yeah.
So therefore, everyone please go to the photoshoptrainingchannel.com and subscribe. And we will also post that link at the end too. So then I believe you can all just click on that link. So without further ado, take it away, Jesus.
All right, how's everybody doing? We're going to be talking about masks today. I think that's one of the areas that most people get confused about. So I'm going to start very, very basic, but I'm going to move on to more complex and more interesting things you can do with masks. And I'm sorry, I didn't have anything prepared. So everything I'm doing, I'm kind of just going along as things come up. So in my mind. So if you have any questions, just feel free to tell me. But anyway, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna just start out by showing you how to. I'm sorry.
I'll just say, or just type them in the Q&A pod at the bottom left. And I'll relay them to you.
Right.
Questions?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. So I'm first gonna show you how to mask out the subject from the background, and I'll show you the way I usually start. And I like to start out by using the quick selection tool, which is this tool right here. You can access it by pressing W on your keyboard or clicking on the toolbar here and selecting it. And I just click and drag and just make a general selection around the subject, in this case the goose. And as you can see, I'm just going pretty fast. I don't really try to be too precise yet. Once I got my subject selected, I like to press Q on the keyboard to bring up the quick mask mode, which is this icon here right below the foreground and background color. And you can just enable it by clicking on the icon or by pressing Q on your keyboard. And then you can see the sections of your subject that were not selected. In this case, this part here and the leg here. So I'm going to zoom in by holding Alt Option on the Mac and scrolling in with the mouse wheel. And from here, you can use the paintbrush tool to paint in the areas that you did not select. So I'm going to select black to paint those areas there that I missed. Something else that I like to do is I like to hold Shift, and I like to make small clicks. Actually, I just did that line there by accident. I'm going to undo that. If I click, hold Shift, and just make little tiny clicks, you can sort of follow the outline of the shape. And if you make mistakes, just hit undo. And anyway, that's one thing you can do to outline your shape. Also, while in the quick mask mode, you can do filters on on the mask here. So you can go to, for example, filter, noise, add noise, and it adds noise to the mask. So this is actually, and I'll show you what that looks like. I'll press Q again, and you can see the selection there. So just keep in mind that when you're in the quick mask mode, you can paint, use filters, and you can also use shapes. So if I were to create a custom shape, we can use that bird there, I guess. Make sure the shape is set to pixels. You can just, actually I'll set it to white that way. We can see the selection there. If I press Q again, you'll see the selection is there. Now if I come into the layer mask here icon while the selection is active, click on that, you'll see the shape there and the duck, or the, excuse me, the goose that I selected. I'm just gonna click on the rectangular marquee tool and fill it with black to get rid of that shape there. Control D to deselect. And anyway, now let's work on the goose here. One thing that I like to do after I created my initial selection is to click on the layer mask. And by the way, if you have the layer selected and you want to activate the layer mask without actually clicking on it, you can press Control and backslash, and it'll select it. So I'll do that again. I can click on the layer, and if I press Control backslash, it selects the layer mask. So you don't actually have to come and click on it if you don't want to. If you want to select the layer while the layer mask is active, you can press Control 2. And by the way, that's Command 2 on the Mac. I don't know if I mentioned that for the Mac on the other shortcut. That's Command backslash to select the layer mask without actually clicking on it. But anyway, so now that I have my layer mask selected, I can go into Window, Properties to bring up my Properties panel, and I can
Jesus,
click on Mask. Yeah.
We just have a couple questions, though.
Yeah,
You
sure.
want to? Okay. So the first one from Anne Marie is: would you normally make a duplicate layer first to work on?
Well, I'm working non-destructively. I created a layer mask, so I can just delete the layer and my original layer is back. So I usually don't do that unless I need to.
Right.
You can if you want to, but if you're working non-destructively, it's not necessary. Everything depends on what you're doing. So usually I don't unless I really have to for whatever reason.
Right. Okay. And then
Any other?
just another quick question from Flora is: how do you do if you want to shade the mask, you want to create a kind of feather when you use the quick mask? I guess, what do you do if you want to shade the mask and you want to create a kind of feather when you use the quick mask? So I guess.
Yeah, I can quickly show you how to do that. I'll duplicate that layer. I'll delete the layer mask. I'll press Control Command click to load the selection. That's how you load a layer mask as a selection. And I'm just going to hide this layer for now so we can work on that. And I think the question was, if you're on the quick mask mode, how can you feather this? If that's the question she was asking,
Yeah, I think so.
I'm zooming in. You can go, once you're in quick mask mode, you can go into filter, blur, Gaussian blur. So that's sort of what I talked about earlier. You can use filters when you're in quick mask mode if you want to. And you can kind of see here, this is actually the mask, the black and white here. You can see how it's sort of feathering that effect. So I'm going to press OK. And then if I press Q once again and add the mask, you'll see now the feather along the edges of the mask. Usually, though, I won't do that, and that's what I was going to talk about next. I'm just going to delete this for now. What I would usually do is in the Properties panel, with the mask selected, I would click on Mask Edge, and I think you have more control of feathering things here because you can also select a view. For example, a white background or the original background or whatever it may be that works better for your current project. So I'm just going to click on, I guess, white background so we can see it a little bit better, I think. And you can move the slider over and that creates the same feather effect as the Gaussian blur on the quick mask. You can also shift the edge in so the edges are not as noticeable. You can create more contrast, and the one that I personally like the most is the smooth. You can really smooth those edges. You saw how before they were too jaggy, and you can just move that over to the right, and they smooth out, and they look much nicer. So I'm just gonna press OK now and work on that. And another thing that I like doing on layer mask, especially when working with organic objects like the goose here, I like to use the smudge tool. And actually, I think that was my tip of the day either yesterday or the day before. I have a Photoshop tip of the day on my Facebook account, and I think I think this was yesterday's, or maybe the one before, the day before yesterday. But anyway, you click on the smudge tool, and with the layer mask selected, you can just create sort of like these little strokes here, and these are probably too big, but I'm just trying to replicate the way the feathers would fall on the duck, or the goose. I mean, I keep saying duck.
Duck,
But
duck,
anyway,
goose.
um, yeah, goose, right. But anyway, you can sort of see what I'm doing here. I'm sort of replicating the way the feathers would look, and if I had a different background, I guess I can add one now. And I'll just choose a random color. I don't know, maybe that blue. You can sort of see how the smudge tool helps sell the effect of that feather. You see that right here? Compare that to maybe something that's much, much sharper here. This has more of a organic
Yeah,
feel to it.
nice.
So that's one of the things you can do. You can sort of see it there better. Obviously, the more work you put in, the more you get out of working with the different tools on the layer mask. Also, just for people that don't know, layer masks are linked to the layer. So if I were to move the layer, the layer mask moves with it. But you can click on this little icon here, this little chain, to unlink those two. And you can click just on the goose itself and move it. See how the layer mask stays put.
Always so
But
strange, right?
right, it looks really strange. Or you can do it the other way around, where you can click on the layer mask and move that over to another area.
Wow.
So that's something you can do there. I'm going to move on to the next image. Does anybody have any questions before we move on?
I think we're caught up for now. So yeah.
Okay,
So,
good. All right, so let me see. We're going to move on to this jet image here. And what I'm going to do here is I want to show you something that you can do with mask. You probably, if you've seen my tutorials, you've probably seen me do this before, but I like creating smoke or fog using clouds and just layer masks, and I'll show you how that works. But first, I'm just going to quickly turn this into a night scene. So I'm going to use the color lookup adjustment layer, and I'm going to select the night from day option here at the bottom, and then I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer, and I'm just going to make this darker, so it sort of looks like it's nighttime, but that'll do for this tutorial. So I'm just going to add a new layer, then I'm going to go into filter, render clouds to create clouds. Oops, sorry about that. I needed to have a black and white as my foreground color. I don't want my clouds to have any color, so I'm going to do that again. Filter clouds, and they're black and white now. Then I'm going to add a layer mask by clicking on the icon here at the bottom. On the layer mask, I'm now going to add clouds. So that's going to create these cloud-looking layer. It's translucent, as you can see. I'm going to add a folder or a group into the composition here, and I'm going to drag that layer into it. Then I'm going to hold Alt and click on the layer mask icon. And if you do that, it creates a black layer, a black layer mask, which hides everything. Now what you can do is click on the brush tool, and I'm going to create a brush, select a brush that's fairly big, probably about that big, maybe bigger, actually not so big, probably about that big. And I'm going to bring the hardness all the way down because I want it to be a really, really soft brush. I'm also going to bring down the flow, and flow is sort of like it's different than opacity. Opacity just controls how opaque your pixels are when you paint them. With flow, you can build on those pixels. So you can paint at 50%, but then when you paint on those pixels again, they'll get darker progressively, sort of like airbrushing. So with my flow down, I can just come in here and select the layer, paint with white to reveal those pixels, and you'll see how I'm starting to create a foggy smoke effect. And like I said, the more that you click on it, the more you can reveal. So you can see how you can barely see it here on top. I only click once, but here at the bottom, I click multiple times. So it really creates depth in the fog simply by using layer mask and two clouds filters, all in just a few simple steps. And you can of course add a hue saturation layer and do a clipping mask, and then just give it some color if you wanted to. So
we have one question.
Yeah.
So Romero asks, it usually works with pictures with a busy background. It's difficult to use that tool, which I believe he's talking about the auto select tool. Is there a better way
Right.
to select if you have a busy background?
It all has to do with contrast. I guess I would need to have a picture in front of me so I can do it in the pictures that I've selected for this tutorial. Maybe I can use this one. I mean, the background is sort of
Pretty busy
busy,
on the right.
but not. Yeah, all you have to think about is the contrast between the foreground and background. And so I wasn't really going to talk about channels just because I think it might get a little too confusing, especially if I didn't have anything prepared. But one thing you can do is go into the channels and see which channel gives you more contrast between the foreground and background. So just by quickly looking at this image, I think the biggest contrast between the foreground and background will probably be this channel. So you can duplicate the channel and use this to make your selection. For example, you can grab the dodge and burn tool, and I can burn the shadows here, and you see how it's creating that edge there. That edge could be used to create the the mask. And obviously, it's going to require a lot of work. The busier the background is, the more work you have to put in. But these techniques should work. You just have to put in the time. So as you can see, I'm using the dodge and burn tools on the copy of the channel with most contrast. And once you're done, you can just create control click, command click on the channel layer to create the selection. If you go back into the layers panel, you can just add a layer mask to that. Obviously, I didn't spend too much time, so I didn't really get the effect that I was going for. But you can continue building on this. One thing you can do is you can hold Shift and click on the layer mask. I'm sorry, Alt and click on the layer mask. Option click on the Mac to see the black and white pixels, which is in reality the layer mask. So if you want to see a layer mask, Alt click on it, and you can continue painting with black and white here to get rid of the background. You don't really have to worry about much, really. All you really need to worry about are the pixels that are closest to the subject, in this case. Um, those pixels fill everything with white and just worry about what's in the edge. Now the problem is going to be here in this part of his head. So I'm just going to hit Alt again just to see how this mask is looking. This is the problem here. So one thing that I would do is I would just paint it with white and then use the smudge tool technique I showed you earlier. Sometimes if you're working with hair in a busy background, you're just going to have to paint that hair out, and there's no real way of getting to it. You're just going to have to either just omit it, and most people won't even know what hair was supposed to be there and what hair wasn't. So just get rid of it if it's too hard. Sometimes it's not worth the trouble. Other times you can use the brush tool to, if you have a Wacom tablet, for example, you can paint in some strands of hair, and that may work. But I guess that's a short answer to a very complicated question.
Okay.
Anything else, Andrew?
Let's see. He said, thank you. So you're doing great. Yeah, you're doing excellent.
Okay. I guess now that we're in this image, there's another thing I just thought about that I guess photographers can take advantage of. First of all, I'll show you how some people like to do burning and dodging, and how I like to do it. So most people usually create a layer, and they fill it with 50% gray. So I'm going to hold Shift and Backspace to bring up my. Oh, and it's not coming up. I think. Oh, there it is. Whoops. I guess my computer was going a little slow with the Adobe Connect software. But anyway, Shift and Backspace to bring in the fill window, and just choose 50% gray. Press OK. And you can either do overlay or soft light. In this case, I'm just going to do soft light. And if you use the burn and dodge tool, you can create some shape with your subject, with your photograph, by adding shadows and highlights. And obviously, I'm not doing too good of a job here. I just kind of want to show you how that works. So you just create a dodge and burn layer, and that's how most people do it. But one way I like doing it is taking advantage of curves and masks to get more control of that process. So one way I would do it is I add a curves adjustment layer, and make this image as dark as you would want it to be. Obviously, it's too saturated here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the blending mode to luminosity, which only takes the luminance values of that mask. So it's not as saturated. And if you're not too familiar with blending modes, I have a 30-minute tutorial on blending modes alone, and I go through each and every one of them and explain what they do. But anyway, luminosity only takes the luminance values of the layer um, you have selected. And then I'm gonna click on invert on this button here. You can press Command I, Control I on the PC to invert that selection to hide every pixel. What I would do is then with the brush tool, select a soft brush, make it a little bit bigger. The flow is at 50%. I'll leave that there. I'll bring the opacity down, and I can also start adding some shadows into the person here. And you can see how that creates shape. I can do the same thing for a dodge layer. So just bring that up like I did for, do the opposite. Set that to luminosity and invert it. This time I'm going to press Control I, Command I to invert, and I can do the same. I can add highlights. Now the advantage of doing it this way than doing it the previous way I showed you is that you're working with curves. You can change the shape of the curve to add more shadows or reduce them if you need to. And you also have the opacity, obviously, to reduce the effect. And you're also working with layer mask. And if you need to, you can use the mask edge if you want to smooth out or feather the mask, as I showed you before. Any other questions, Andrew?
Nope, it's all good.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to show you is most people don't realize that you can keep nesting layer mask, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I have I can create a layer mask, and I'm just gonna. It doesn't really matter what I mask out. I just want to show you the point of nesting layer mask. So I have this layer mask, and I created this feather effect here. I can then create a group, put that in, put the layer in the group, add a layer mask, and keep adding to that effect. I can also create a group again and nest that group into the first group and add a layer mask to this group. And you can actually keep doing that 10 times if you're on Photoshop CS5 or higher, and only 5 times if you're on CS4 or below. So keep that in mind. You don't just need, you can use more than one layer mask on a layer, and this is how you would do it, by nesting layers into groups and keep doing it over and over again up to 10 times. And there's another type of layer mask that you can work with, and I'm just gonna get that layer out of there.
I tell you that really has saved my my hide when I have a huge amount of layers in a layer group, and I know that I have to cut through a whole bunch of them. I just add that layer mask and I can paint it right through, and like, whew, it's really saved me on some very intense jobs, you know.
Yep, nesting layer mask. There's a different type of layer mask, and these are found in smart objects. So if you convert a layer into a smart object and you apply a smart filter,
Nice.
and we'll just work with clouds again, since that's what we were working with before and we're familiar with it. You see this little white square here? This is a layer mask. So I can come in here and I can sort of create the same cloudy effect that I created earlier, just in a different way. So
yeah, cool. Yeah, I think Dave
you can
Cross
see how
is a
that
big
works with
fan of the smart filter layer mask.
yeah. And you can also in a way nest these filters. So for example, if I wanted to add another filter to this layer, but I didn't want this layer mask to affect it, I can just turn this smart object into a smart object, and then I can apply a different filter. I don't know what I will apply now, maybe like, I don't know, fibers, for example. And I can use a different mask
Oh,
for
cool.
this second filter. So you can nest smart objects onto smart objects if you
Cool.
wanted to.
Excellent.
Any questions on that?
Nope. All good. All good.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you some quick little tricks that you can do with other. For example,
We do have a new
I'm sorry.
question.
Yeah.
So, what is the difference between opacity and flow, and how best to work with them when painting a mask? So if you could go.
Okay. Yeah, I'll explain that again. I'll quickly show you the difference. I'll try to visually explain it. So opacity just controls how the opaqueness of your paint. So if I'm painting with black at 100%, it's obviously going to paint with black. But if I bring that to say 50% or I don't know, oh yeah, 40%, you see that that's 40% black there. It's sort of a gray color. Um, the flow works in a similar way, but you can build on it. You see how I keep painting and it sort of creates that ghosting effect as I paint over it. It's every time the brush goes over the same spot, it adds more color to that. So I'll try to show that again. Opacity and flow both at 100%. Paints with black. If I bring that down, it keeps painting with gray, or excuse me, 40% until I add another coat. The difference with this is that you keep as you paint, you keep adding more paint to the same area. Like if you're spray painting, for example, that's the best way I could describe it. I don't know if I was clear on that, if they got that.
Keeps building, right? Keeps building.
Yeah. You build on what you're painting. Any other questions?
It was kind of a interesting question, but hope you don't mind my question. This is by I believe you would pronounce it Jurgen. Hope you don't mind my question. Which release of Photoshop are you using?
CC.
Right. So
Yeah,
it is CC.
the newest latest version.
So I thought.
Yeah.
And then Matic2 says, is flow the same as density in Lightroom when using the brush tool?
But you might have to help me out on that, Andrew. I'm not a photographer, so I really don't use Lightroom
Right.
much. So I wouldn't be able to give you an answer on that. But do you know, Andrew?
Uh, right now, I can't really picture it because I'm kind of in this mode. But if I were to open up Lightroom, I could answer it later. I think it probably is though density in Lightroom because if you're using the brush tool and there's a density slider, it's got to be about the
Yeah,
same same as flow distribution, I would imagine. So good. Okay, that's it for
yeah.
questions for now.
Okay, cool. These are just little quick tricks you can do when you have a layer mask. So if you have a mask, and I'm just gonna make a quick mask here. And by the way, when you're using the quick selection tool, and I didn't show this earlier, if you click on something else other than the layer, it's not gonna select the pixels that you're intending to. I have the layer mask selected. I need to be on the actual layer, and that's what those little lines around the layer icon are for, to tell you where you're on. So Control D to deselect and try again. And if I make a mistake like I did there, you can hold Alt and you see the little, I don't know if you can, it might be a little too small, but there's a plus icon right in between the brush there. If I hold Alt or Option on the PC, it turns into a minus and I can delete pixels. But anyway, that's really not that important. What I wanted to show you, and actually I don't know why I created this layer, let me delete it. I'm just going to create a layer, and if you have a layer mask, you can duplicate that layer mask by holding Alt and just dragging it to another layer. So you see how I just created this identical layer just by holding Alt. That's Option on the PC, oh, excuse me, on the Mac. I'll do that
I love
again. I'll
that
hold
feature.
Alt Option, click and drag. Yeah, and it makes a duplicate. And here's like a trick, an extra key you can add to that trick. You can hold Alt and Shift, Option and Shift, click and drag, and it makes an inverted selection.
Ah,
So you can see it got rid of that
that's cool. I've
of
never
that
never
piece,
tried
right?
that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, so just hold Alt Shift to do the invert, and here's like another. This is not really related to mask, but it's related to selections. A lot of people know that when you make a selection, I'm just gonna make a random selection here. You can press Control D to deselect, but you can also press Control Shift D, Command Shift D to bring back that selection, even if you've gone and I'm just gonna go ahead and just paint a whole bunch of stuff so you can see that I'm not just hitting undo. If I press Control Shift D, it brings that selection back. So Photoshop always remembers the very, very last selection you've made, no matter how many different steps you've taken after that. So you can just remember that Control D, Command D to deselect, Control Shift D to bring back whatever the last selection that you created is. Any questions before I move on, Andrew?
No, just a somewhat of a comment though to if you could slow down just a little bit. I think people are loving all the tips, but just some of them are kind of zooming by. Um, but I think
Yeah,
people
I
are
have to
learning a lot.
apologize. I tend to be a little too yeah, I tend to be a little too quick, and I realize that after I record my tutorials, I go back and listen to them, and sometimes I have to edit them so they're not so fast because I tend to speak really fast. I sometimes forget how much I say in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, but I think most people are pretty
Okay.
grateful that they're learning a lot. So, you there?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just I was trying to see because I like I said I had about 30 minutes to prepare for this, and I just wrote down
I know.
everything I can think about layer mask on a piece of paper, and I'm just going down the list to make sure that I covered everything. And yeah,
How about showing
I think I
just for how about for fun, just showing um, like say you're making a movie poster and you had like a couple walking and you wanted to blend them into like another background and just show like the gradient use of a layer mask as compared to the brush use of a layer mask.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can probably do that with this here. So now we have the goose here again, and I'm just gonna convert that into a smart object because I'm never gonna need the background for that again. But I do want to keep it just in case, like for example here I cut off part of his foot and maybe I didn't notice it, and I want to come back later on and bring that back. So that's one reason to keep your original as a smart object, so you can double click on it, open it up, and then bring that part back, and save it, and it'll show again on your composition. So I think what you were talking about, Andrew, is when you create a layer mask, you can also use the gradient tool, and you can sort of feather parts of your subject like so. So you can just click and drag, and it'll make a nice transition. And again, I'll hold Alt
yeah, so
Option on the Mac.
nice.
Yeah, just to show you. So this is this. So essentially, when you're working with masks, it's very simple. Black hides, white shows, and everything in between is a transition from opaque to transparent.
Excellent.
Yeah, and yeah. Any other questions regarding masks or anything else? Really, we still have some
You're
time.
getting some nice compliments now, you know. Allie says you have given us a lot to take in. Wonderful job. Anne Marie says you're doing a superb job. So yeah, and I think this is very good. So keep on
All
rocking.
right. Well, yeah, yeah. Thanks. I didn't have much time to prepare. I wish I had more to show you guys. I just,
Yeah,
had
absolutely.
to literally find three images and think of what I was gonna do with them.
Yeah, you saved the day. You know, the other option was we might have had to cancel because of Kelly not being able to make it, but you really saved the day. So thank you once again for that.
Yeah, no problem. You're welcome. I was just sitting down on my couch watching the Manchester United soccer game.
Oh,
So I think this is a little bit better use of my time.
okay. So one question. Constance
Yeah.
Constance asks, can you explain some of the options in the Refine Edge menu, the Refine Edge tool?
Sure, sure. Let me quickly create a selection here to work with.
And then after that, Crazy Lyle says, can you show an example of selecting flyaway hair and replacing
Um,
the background under it?
that's gonna be a little bit tougher because I have to find an image to work with first, and
Yeah.
like I don't know if I could find that quickly, but I do have a tutorial just on that on my website. If you go to photoshoptrainingchannel.com, I have about a 30-minute tutorial just on
Excellent.
that specific question, so that might help them
Right,
out.
and we will be
Um,
posting his link at the end, so everyone will be able to get that. Yep.
yeah. Anyway, so I think the question was explaining the different options in this panel or this window here.
Right. So
What was
yeah,
it?
can you explain
Yeah.
the
Okay.
options in the Refine Edge menu or Refine Mask, Refine
Yeah.
Edge? Yeah.
Sure, the ones that you probably use the most are the view mode, and as I said earlier, they just give you a different background to work with. So you may have just the marching ants, the overlay, which is essentially the same thing as the quick mask mode there. You can have a black background, white background. The layer mask, which is what it is, really black and white and shades of gray is what creates your layer mask. Or on layers, you really can't tell here, but what it means is it's going to show you the layer that you have selected and the layers below it or above it. So essentially the composition, and then this one just reveals the entire layer. The ones that I like to work with the most are on layers, depending on what's in the background, or either black or white, again, depending on my subject and what's going on. I never really use the marching ants or on layer or any of the others, but feel free to use whatever works for the project you're working on. Um, the let me zoom in. Actually, as I said earlier, the smoothing smooths out the edges, and you probably won't see much because we already smoothed that out earlier. Actually, this is a different composition. This is a different mask, so this should show some smoothing. But anyway, you can sort of see that here. When I bring that over, it it smooths out the edge of the mask. Another one that I like the ones that I almost always use is smoothing and feather, just a little bit. I never really go too crazy on feathering because it just creates that ghosting effect. So I usually just add about a pixel, two at the most, of feathering. Smoothing, it really depends on how the original selection was created. Contrast, I don't really use too much contrast, but you can see what happens there. The transition between black and white, you can sort of see that here. And if I bring the contrast over, you see how that transition gets sharper. So it's more of a line now as opposed to a gradient. Shift edge just sort of brings in the edges of the selection. So if I want to bring the edge in, I can use that. And for people that work with green screens and things like that, this one actually works pretty well with, because a lot of times you get a green halo like on the edges. You can just bring the edge in just a little bit, and that usually gets rid of it if you have a good selection, of course. And those are the ones that you'll probably be working with the most. And obviously, you can remember your settings in case you have similar images that you could apply the same settings to. And actually, I just thought about another thing. It's not necessarily a layer mask, but it could work as a layer mask. So I'm just going to bring the goose over into the jet image just so we can have two images to work with. And one thing that you can use is the blend if option in the layer styles panel. So I'm going to double click on the side here to bring up the layer style panel, and the blend if will blend layers together. It's not necessarily like a mask, but you can think of it that way. What this means, this layer here, or excuse me, this option here talks about this layer, the layer that you have currently selected. So you can click and drag the dark values of this layer to make them invisible. And look what happens to the neck here where it's dark. They become invisible. See that as I drag further to
That's always so freaky.
the right?
So freaky when you show someone that it can do that,
Right. And then, but the downside is that the transitions are very sharp, as you can see here. One way to alleviate that problem is by holding Alt or Option on the Mac and clicking on that, and notice how that split that triangle in half. So now you can create a smoother transition, and the pixels are not so so jagged and so sharp. They're smoother, and you can just bring that over. And you can do the same thing on the other side. These are the light values of the image here, or the goose image. If I bring that over to the left, you'll see how the lighter pixels start disappearing. So maybe if I had the goose maybe like in a white background, I can just drag this over to the left just a little bit, and it'll remove most of the white on the image. So I mean, it can work sometimes to remove the backgrounds, but not usually. Usually you use it to blend layers together. And now the underlying layer is the same thing, but now we're going to be looking at the luminance values of the underlying layer. So the dark values of the underlying layer will come through if I drag this over to the left. Notice the wing here. Those luminance values are darker than the ones of the goose here, so they come through. And I can do that. I can do that with the light values as well. This part of the jet here, comes through because it's lighter than the pixels above it. So in a way, this is more of a blending mode than a mask, but you can use it to uh, blend or make really interesting transitions between two layers. Any questions with
Okay.
that?
Uh, there's that question about the flyaway hair. And then Anne Marie asks, do you have any other tricks to like the smoke fog trick you showed? Yes, no.
With masks,
I'm not sure if she's
I
asking
mean,
how do you create the smoke fog or just how you would utilize layer mask with that type of texture. Not really. Anne Marie, did you want to
I'm not sure if
further
I understand.
elaborate? Let's see if she has
Yeah,
answer.
I mean, is the question, do I have more tricks with masks, or do I have more tricks using that specific technique?
Yeah, let's see if she adds more tricks with masks in
Okay.
general.
Um,
I guess maybe in relationship
you know
to.
what yeah, the problem is I don't have the images that I could work. I can think of some that I've done. Again, in the hair masking tutorial that I did, I showed how you can add strands of hair while while painting on a mask. But I don't have those images. You know what? Maybe I do. I'm gonna have to go through my hard drive here and see where I think I might be able to have all my tutorials saved. So maybe I can bring that up for you guys
Yeah, do remember everyone that
and work with that.
this was absolutely last minute because Kelly is currently sick, and it's wonderful that he was available in the first place to do this, and let alone have access to. Ah, perfect. He found one. So excellent.
Yeah. Um,
That's pretty fly away.
yeah. So yeah, that's pretty fly away. I mean, there's different ways you can do this, and the I'm trying to think. If you watch the tutorial, you'll get everything step by step because I actually, had notes and thought about it. Right now, I'm just sort of, just going off the top of my head of what I did. But and I did it a while back ago too, so I don't even remember exactly what I said or did. But anyway, if with a fresh mind, what I would first do is with something like this, I personally like to work with channels, and I think that's what I did on the tutorial. And oh yeah, that's what I did. I have the layer mask save here. It looks like excuse me, the mask save here. So usually what I do is I go through each individual channel and see which one has more contrast. I think I did that earlier today. And in this particular case is the blue channel. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, well, what if the lady had blonde hair, or what if the background was black? Like, you have to just think of it as what's going to give me the most contrast. So don't be so specific to this image. Just think, I need contrast. And sometimes to create contrast, you have to cheat a little bit. You have to, before you even get to the channels, you might realize that you need to create contrast. So what you may have to do is create, oops, sorry about that. You may have to create contrast by creating, completely damaging the image like so. But look at the contrast here. There's a lot more contrast now in the strands of hair. And obviously this is not the layer that you're going to keep, but you're going to create your mask using this layer and then apply it to the original layer. But I don't need to do that in this particular case because there's plenty of contrast to work with. But just keep in mind that you need to look for contrast. And once you have the contrast, it's easier to mask out hair. But anyway, so in this case, the blue channel has a lot of contrast. So as you can see, what I did in the tutorial is I made a duplicate of it, and it's essentially what I showed you earlier. Let me just disable that. I I this part, actually let me bring that to 100%. This part here, I can just paint with black because I obviously want to keep her face. And by the way, this is the opposite of what I want because when you paint with black, you're trying to hide those pixels. When you paint with white, you're trying to keep this. So if I were to keep this selection as a mask now, it would keep the background and not the foreground, but that's okay. We're just creating the mask now, so it really doesn't matter. So, you
Reminds
can
me of the.
also apply adjustments.
As I say, it reminds me of The Grudge,
I'm sorry?
the movie The Grudge or whatever.
Oh, the growth. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
scary.
Um, you can apply adjustments to channels. So I can use the levels adjustment to uh, bring out the whites here. So make these darker. Remember, all I want is black and white and a few grays here. Maybe something like that. Press OK. But now I want the other. I want the other thing. I want the inversion of this. So I can press Control I to invert. And now I can see I have some problems here. You can see that grayish there. That's not going to look too good when I create the mask. So I can do what I did earlier and use the burn tool. Uh, Make sure I have the shadows selected, not the highlights, and then uh, make these pixels darker here to mask out the hair. And if you delete some of these strands, that's okay. Nobody's gonna say, oh, there was supposed to be one strand of hair here. What happened? And nobody's gonna ever notice. So don't worry if you have to get rid of some strands of hair. But anyway, obviously I can do
I don't know,
a little
some
bit
of the clients I've had.
of. Yeah, I know what you mean.
A tiny
But
little
anyway,
strand.
right. Actually, for I was talking to Burt Monroy once, and this is like a quick little side story. If you don't know Burt Monroy, he's like the Photoshop genius. He's a friend of mine, and I was at his house, and he told me that one time he creates these humongous. They're I don't know how many feet wide, but they're wall size Photoshop, realistic looking. He calls them paintings. And you can look them up online. But anyway, he said that he's received emails from people saying there was one pixel that didn't line up on your 30-foot wall, and he seemed to be really bothered by that. But anyway, that's a quick side story there. So he's an amazing Photoshop artist. He's my favorite. Anyway, so now that I have black and white, I can click on the layer here to make a selection. I can go back into the layers panel, and I can just click on the mask here to make the mask. And look at that. I didn't put too much time or effort, and I even told a side story, but the hair looks, I would say, looks pretty good. You don't you One other thing you can do, and this is relating to that earlier question, if I had any other tricks with masks, this is one of them. I'm going to control click on the layer mask here to make this selection. You can see it here. If I press Q on the keyboard, you can see where the selection is. It's selecting these strands of
I
hair.
think people will love to see that again. If you could maybe deselect and do it again.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I'm clicking and pressing Control. That's Command on the Mac on the layer mask icon. And notice how that square comes up on the hand there on the cursor when I hold Control or Command. If I click on it, it loads that layer, or excuse me, that layer mask as a selection. And you can do that with any layer. But anyway, so now that I have that created, I can add a new layer and put it below the layer of the hair. And I'm just going to select a color that's similar to the hair color. In this case, it's brown here. So maybe we'll choose a darker color. Maybe like I don't know. Trying to find a good one here. Maybe that one. And just add a selection. Before I fill the layer, I'm going to add the selection. I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm just going to add the selection. And this is going to oops, I'm sorry about that. I didn't want to hold Alt. I just wanted to create the layer mask there. So I'm going to fill that with the foreground color, and notice that, and I'm going to disable this. I'm going to just delete it and do it again just because I think I did it too fast. So all I did is I just created a layer with that color. If I press Control, click on the hair layer and apply that same layer, you know what? I don't even need to do that. I can do the trick I showed you earlier. I can hold Alt, Option on the Mac, and drag that and make a copy of that. Nice. But notice what happens here. It adds some color to that hair. It makes some of those strands stick out better. And you can do the same trick that I showed you earlier, where I created a new group. I'm going to add that in there, and I'm just going to hide every pixel in that layer by making a layer mask that's black. And with white, I can come in there and paint some of those strands that need to be brought back in. So I don't know how it looks on your screen, but in my screen, it's cool. Yeah, so that's one of the tricks that you can do with a layer mask. And if I zoom out further, you can see how those look. So that's before and after. Yeah, you can see that. Obviously, I need to do a little more. I can do a little more work here if need be. Nice. But I do a similar if you want to see this video in a video that I thought out more, you can go to my YouTube channel, and I have a tutorial where I use this very same image, and you can download it too if you want to work on it to practice. But that's one of the other tricks you can do with layer mask.
We'll get that link together too.
Any other questions?
I think no, I think you're caught up with that. So, like I said, you stepped in today and really saved the day. There's 8 more minutes. Did you want to do 8 more minutes? Did you want to take it?
Andrew?
Yeah, eight more minutes. Is that good, or did you want to take it further? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so I was saying there's about now it's 7 more minutes. Is that good, or did you want to take it a little bit longer, or is that what you can do today?
I mean, if people have questions, I'll be glad to answer them. But unfortunately, since I had 20 minutes to prepare,
Yeah.
I don't know what else to just. I don't know if you've seen the movie 8 Mile, but they freestyle. I feel like a freestyle rapper. Just people throw words at me, and I gotta come up with a song.
Yeah, you're doing great. Excellent. I don't know. There's so 7 minutes left. Do you have any kind of last minute tricks or?
Oh well, there's one I just thought about, and only because we were talking about Burt Monroe, and he's the one that showed me this trick. But it's not a really big, huge trick, but I think it's really cool. So if you have a layer, and you saw me do this before, um, you can add a clouds. Oops, actually black and white. Um, so this is what a clouds layer looks like. But if you hold Alt before clicking on clouds, it creates a, oops, that didn't work, of course. Let me see if that works again. There we go. It creates clouds with more contrast. So you can have low contrast clouds, or you can have high contrast clouds. And that trick comes from Burt Monroe. I was hanging out at his studio, and he showed it to me.
Nice.
It's impossible hanging out with that man and not learning a Photoshop trick or two.
Oh, you must be totally obsessed with it, right?
I asked him if I could come over and just hang out, and I had about an hour. He lives in Berkeley, California, and I live in Alameda, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I told him I can only hang out for about, an hour, and I ended up being there 3 hours. He just has so much to say in relation to Photoshop.
Nice.
Yeah. So, any other questions or?
Just people starting to say thanks. So should we wrap it up and I can start posting links to things?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll be glad to answer any more questions. If not, then yeah, I guess we can wrap it up if nobody has anything to say.
I think it's good. I think that's good. Okay, so first link I will post is if you're not already part of the Photoshop and Lightroom group on Facebook, I just posted it in the group chat. So that's a link to that. And then please go to the Photoshop training channel and subscribe. I will post that now. And that would be like a newsletter that people could get.
Yeah, and it's not really a newsletter per se. Like I won't spam you or anything. All I do is I send you an email every time I put up a new tutorial, and I also have subscriber-only tutorials, so they're free. All you do is enter your email, and every now and again you'll receive an email saying, "Hey, there's a new tutorial," or saying, "Hey, there's a new tutorial just to say thanks to all the people that subscribed to me." And I have a subscriber-only tutorial archive that you could check out if you want to.
Okay, great.
Also, if you're on Facebook, and I think most people would be, at least listening to this, you can add me on Facebook since
Did I find
I
that?
post a Photoshop tip of the day. Yeah, Photoshop tip of the day every day. Sometimes I post it pretty late because I get busy, but it's always there. And I also have an archive of every tip that I've done on a on my website, and you can scroll down on my Facebook feed. And I think it's really funny. I'm looking at the comments now, and there's a person named Ramiro who said "Gracias, Shui," which is really funny to me. If you're not Latino or don't speak Spanish, you won't know that Shui is a nickname for people who are named Jesus. So I find that very funny
That's
to
cool.
see that on there.
Excellent. So yeah, so everyone, if you look in the group chat, there is the first link is to the Photoshop and Lightroom group on Facebook. The second one is the Photoshop training channel where you can subscribe. And then there is the Photoshop training channel on YouTube, which you can follow, and then the Photoshop training channel Facebook page. So I believe that's pretty all
I'm
inclusive.
looking at some. Um, yeah, and sorry for interrupting, Andrew. I'm looking at some of the questions, and if you don't mind, I'd like to answer some of them.
Sure.
Somebody asked why use rendered clouds. Somebody asked why use rendered clouds as opposed to a picture of clouds. That's very simple. Sometimes you don't have clouds. Like today, I didn't have a picture of clouds, so I needed to create some clouds. So that's one reason.
Hmm.
Let me see. Somebody said if they could stalk me on Twitter. Is that what it says? I lost it.
Yeah.
If that was a question, then yeah, sure, you can stalk me on Twitter if you want.
Yeah, I'll post that too.
They're moving to,
Can you
yeah, they're
Jesus, can
moving to.
you click the stop the sharing button though for your presentation? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, yes, there.
Post this. Mm.
This is going to be recorded, going to be on the Photoshop and Lightroom sister website, and you can find the link to that on the group page.
Yeah.
I think the URL is Photoshop
Well,
lightroomgroup.com. I think
I
it
think
is.
there'll be a specific one for this, so I'll get that out
Okay, cool.
and give that to you and post it in the group. So yeah. And then
And if go
I
ahead.
was just going to say I'll get your Twitter address so people can follow you there.
Okay, cool. And if anybody wants to say hi on Facebook, Twitter, email, anywhere, just let me know. My contact information is on my website. And although it takes me sometimes a few days to reply, I do reply all my emails.
Hi, I think it was quite a success, especially the fact that it was kind of last minute. And thank you so much, Jesus, and everyone have a wonderful weekend.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for watching. And if you have any questions regarding this or anything else, feel free to let me know.
Okay, and then I'm going to stop the recording, and then we can talk a little bit uh, amongst ourselves.
Cool.